Caitlin Clark's Nike deal isn't just a windfall, it's a reckoning. When the numbers leaked, $28 million over 8 years, it ignited a rage that had been simmering quietly across locker rooms. Veterans who've carried the WNBA through decades of limited exposure and low pay now see the system pivot overnight towards celebrity-driven economics.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The rawness of that resentment isn't jealousy. It's the pain of being outpaced by hype after years of sacrifice. And as some players admit behind closed doors, it's not about Clark personally. It's about what she represents, the abrupt rewriting of value in a league still finding its identity. As the WNBA pushes to renegotiate the CBA, the emotional tension is matched by fiscal anxiety. The same forces driving revenue, Clark's presence, are now threatening job security for mid-tier veterans. A raise in the salary cap could invite teams to shed seasoned players for cheaper, younger options, forcing a painful cost-benefit calculation. The irony is brutal. The veterans whose labor built the WNBA might be its first casualties in an era they made possible. Every decision from here risks alienating the past while chasing the future, a dilemma no contract can fix. Stephanie White's return to the Indiana Fever should have been a quiet, feel-good reunion, a former player coming home to lead her old team. But instead, it triggered a full-blown identity crisis across the entire WNBA. Because the second her hiring became public, it became clear this wasn't just a coaching decision. It was a political move, a symbolic pivot, a line in the sand between the league's past and its rapidly approaching future. And that future? It's Caitlin Clark. Clark's rise to superstardom has happened at warp speed. She hasn't played a single minute of pro basketball yet, but the media attention, endorsement money, and cultural capital she's racked up have already eclipsed what most WNBA vets accumulate in an entire career. Her $28 million Nike deal didn't just break records. It shattered the league's financial hierarchy in one blow. For veterans who've spent years advocating for better pay, traveling in cramped conditions, and holding the league together with sweat and grit, that number hit like a gut punch. Not because Clark didn't earn it, but because of what it exposes. While Clark is set to rake in millions off the court, the top WNBA salary still hovers around $240,000. That's the max. And for most players, it's significantly less. We're talking about women who've been all-stars, champions, mentors, and advocates, now forced to watch as the rules change overnight, just not in time for them. There's pride, sure, but there's also a bitter undertone, because the league told them for years there wasn't enough money. Now, suddenly, there's plenty, just not for everyone. This is the tension Stephanie White is walking into. Her move from the Connecticut Sun to Indiana was more than a coaching shuffle. It was a shift in allegiance. In Connecticut, White was known for prioritizing experience and defense, a coach who built around veteran leadership and culture. She was a locker room stabilizer, a player's coach, the kind who trusted the grind over the headlines. But in Indiana, everything is different. This isn't just another team. It's the epicenter of a revolution, the place where Caitlin Clark will start her pro career, the focal point of the league's entire marketing machine. In a locker room, it's not exactly a calm space right now. There's pressure, there's scrutiny, and most dangerously, there's division. Because the players White now leads are the same players who remember her defending physical play against Clark during her Connecticut days. And that's not a detail anyone forgot. Now she's expected to turn around and protect Clark, physically and psychologically, from those same tactics. That shift doesn't go unnoticed. For some, it looks like a contradiction. For others, it feels like betrayal. That credibility gap is very real. And it's just one part of the fire White has to put out. The bigger explosion is the growing resentment among vets. Not just about Clark, but about what her arrival has triggered. The league is seeing a surge in media attention, ticket sales, and merchandise revenue, and nearly all of it traces back to Clark's name. The WNBA saw the numbers and made a bold move. They opted out of the current collective bargaining agreement. That's not a light decision. It's a clear demand. We want more. More money, more equity, more say. But here's where it gets complicated, because that push for better pay is being powered indirectly by the very player who's creating the divide. Veterans are caught in a paradox. They're criticizing the league's obsession with Clark's hype while also using that very hype to justify salary increases. Behind closed doors, that contradiction is brewing tension. It's not just about fairness anymore. It's about survival. And the fear is growing that a raise in the salary cap, instead of creating more opportunity, could accelerate what insiders are calling a veteran purge. Translation: higher cap, fewer high-salary vets. Teams might look at their rosters and realize they can drop one or two experienced players in exchange for cheaper rookies and still have enough space to secure a superstar. Economically, it makes sense. Culturally, it's a disaster. It threatens to gut the middle class of the WNBA, the players who aren't household names but are the heartbeat of their teams, the ones who hold the locker room together. Men are the rookies, stabilize the franchise, and now they're the first on the chopping block. White has to coach through that. She has to lead players who may already be emotionally checking out, wondering if this will be their last season, if they're just placeholders in a league that's clearly choosing flash over foundation. She has to keep them motivated while also protecting Clark from becoming the scapegoat for everything going wrong. And let's not pretend this isn't about more than basketball. The moment Clark entered the conversation, the league shifted into celebrity mode. Her media narrative, her branding, her cultural symbolism, it's taken over. And with that comes a very different kind of scrutiny. There are already whispers about favoritism, about the league bending its own standards to accommodate its new star. That kind of treatment isn't just annoying, it's destabilizing. For players who were told to play through it, to earn their moment, to stay humble, watching Clark get front-row treatment from day one stings. No matter how talented she is, the disparity in how she's being handled versus how they were treated sends a message. And it's not one that encourages unity. That division could easily split locker rooms, fracture team dynamics, and create resentment that bleeds into gameplay. One rough foul, one misstep in the media, one moment of frustration on the court, and it could all blow wide open. White has to be the buffer, the bridge, the one person who convinces everyone that it's still worth pulling together, that this team is more than a marketing campaign, but they can find common ground between the old guard and the new. But let's not sugarcoat it. That's a brutal job, because she's also under her own microscope. The media doesn't forget. They know what she stood for in Connecticut. They know the kind of player she backed. And now, she's coaching the symbol of everything that's disrupting that model. Her first matchup against Connecticut, it won't just be a game. It'll be a reckoning. The players, the fans, the media, everyone will be watching to see whether she truly left her old identity behind, whether she's all in on this new era, and whether she has what it takes to hold it all together under pressure that has nothing to do with excess and OS. Because this season won't be defined by box scores. It'll be defined by how the league handles the emotional, financial, and cultural blowback of the Clark era. And at the center of it all is a coach who didn't ask to be a symbol, but became one anyway. White didn't just accept a coaching job. She stepped into a storm. And the only thing more uncertain than how she'll handle it is how much more intense it's going to get. If this drama has you glued to every trade, tweet, and tension-filled timeout, make sure you like this video. Share it with the friends already debating the future of the W in your group chat. And tell us in the comments, is the league evolving or erasing? Can the vets and the rookies find common ground? Or is this just the beginning of a much deeper divide? And if you want to stay plugged into the chaos, the comebacks, and the meltdowns, we're just getting started. Hit subscribe and stick with us. Because in the WNBA this season, nothing is off the record. And if you think the tension ends with the Indiana Fever locker room, think again. This shift is reverberating across every team in the league. From the top-tier contenders to the rebuilding franchises, everyone's recalculating their next move under this new Clark-dominated reality. Front offices are doing quiet math. Agents are panicking behind closed doors. Players are checking their contracts, and wondering if their years of loyalty are about to mean absolutely nothing. Because the moment the WNBA opted out of the current collective bargaining agreement, it sent a message: we're done waiting. But also opened a floodgate of anxiety. Every CBA negotiation comes with winners and losers, and this time, the lines are already being drawn. On one side, you have the stars and rising rookies, marketable, affordable, and camera-ready. On the other, mid-tier vets, the players who've aged just enough to be expensive, but not enough to retire. The ones who've built the league's foundation, only to find themselves on shaky ground. This isn't paranoia. It's strategy, and it's happening right now. Coaches across the league are being pulled in two directions. Do you honor the veterans who've kept the culture alive? Or do you chase what's new, fast, and profitable? The ones who fit the highlight reels and drive jersey sales. And let's be real, how many organizations are going to choose loyalty over revenue? That's the existential dread that's crept into the league. It's not about hating Caitlin Clark. It's about what her arrival represents. The speed at which the entire economic and cultural landscape is shifting. The subtle, creeping suspicion that if you're not a star or the star, you're suddenly disposable. And the irony? The players most threatened by this change are also the ones advocating for it. The union is fighting for higher pay, better conditions, and a more sustainable future. All of that is overdue. But the fuel behind that movement? It's largely Clark, her popularity, her revenue generation, her ability to draw in casual fans and corporate dollars. So now, those same players are stuck in a contradiction. They're leveraging her success to push for league-wide gains, while also trying to protect themselves from being left behind in the process. It's a tightrope walk, and it's not going well. Unity in the locker room used to be one of the WNBA's strongest assets. It was one of the few leagues where players across teams would rally around each other for the bigger picture. Pay equity, social justice, collective wins. But that unity? It's cracking. Quietly, carefully, but undeniably. And Stephanie White? She's caught in the middle. She has to lead a team where half the players might be resentful of the attention Clark is getting, while the other half are either in awe or terrified of saying the wrong thing. That's not a locker room dynamic. It's a pressure cooker. And she has to keep it from exploding because the Fever aren't just a basketball team anymore. They're the face of this new era. Every success they have will be celebrated. Every failure will be dissected. Every hint of internal conflict will be spun into narrative. Are the vets turning on the rookie? Is White losing control? Is Clark too big for the league already? And you know the media won't wait for context. One bad stretch of games, one tense moment on the bench, one offhand comment in a post-game interview. That's all it takes. The headlines write themselves. So White's role? It's not just head coach. It's crisis manager, reputation defender, narrative controller. She has to coach the most scrutinized team in the WNBA while also rewriting the perception that she's abandoned the very ethos she built her career on. And again, this goes back to Connecticut. In the Sun system, White was known for a gritty, defense-first mindset. She valued toughness, loyalty, veteran leadership. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Her teams were consistent, respected, grounded. That culture came from her. And now, she's in Indiana, leading a team that feels like the opposite of that philosophy. To her former players, that doesn't just feel like a new job. It feels like defection. And when the Fever eventually face the Sun this season, that game's not just about points on the board. It's going to be emotional, personal, symbolic. A collision between the old model and the new. Between the players who kept the league alive and the one player it's now being rebuilt around. That's the real storyline this year. It's not just can Caitlin Clark dominate at the pro level. It's can the league survive the culture shock of Caitlin Clark's arrival without destroying what made it special. Because if the WNBA leans too hard into the celebrity model, into marketability over merit, hype over history, it runs the risk of alienating the very people who built it. The vets who played for pennies, who boarded commercial flights after back-to-backs, who gave up overseas money to stay and fight for the league's credibility. Those players aren't just watching, they're waiting. Waiting to see if this new era includes them. or replaces them. And make no mistake, they're already speaking out. The frustration is coming through in interviews, in cryptic social media posts, in union meetings. There's a clear message being sent. We're not going to be collateral damage. And if the league doesn't listen, the backlash will be louder than they expect. Because fans are noticing, too. They're seeing the shift, the imbalance, the way veteran players are being sidelined while one rookie is handed the keys to the kingdom. And even the most diehard Clark supporters are asking, how long can this model sustain itself? Can one player carry the weight of an entire league's expectations? Should she have to? The danger isn't that Clark will fail. The danger is that she'll succeed spectacularly, and everyone else will be treated like background noise. That the WNBA becomes so hyper-focused on capitalizing off her momentum that it forgets the foundation it was built on. Stephanie White's job is to prevent that from happening, at least within her own team. She has to make sure that Clark thrives without becoming an island, that the veterans feel valued, not discarded, that the locker room doesn't turn into a Cold War between eras. That Indiana becomes more than just the Caitlin Clark show. But she also has to win. That's the catch. Because if the Fever struggle, if the results don't match the hype, White won't be afforded the patience or the benefit of the doubt. She'll be blamed for not managing the egos, for not living up to expectations, for not evolving fast enough. And that's the impossible part. She's being asked to completely redefine her coaching identity, mid-career, without losing credibility, connection, or control. And she has to do it while guiding a rookie with unprecedented pressure on her back, all while being watched by a league in flux, a union in revolt, and a fan base on edge. That's the reality. That's where things stand. And the season hasn't even started yet. The uncomfortable truth? This isn't just about Caitlin Clark. It's about what happens when a league finally gets the attention it's been begging for, but on someone else's terms. For years, the WNBA has fought tooth and nail for visibility, for sponsors, for media coverage that didn't come with condescension, for acknowledgement that these athletes are elite, not just good for women. The players carry that fight. They did the activism. They made the social statements. They took the hits, both literal and metaphorical. And when things got hard, they didn't leave, they doubled down. Now, that spotlight has arrived, but it's not evenly distributed. It's laser-focused. And for some of the players who built the runway, it feels like they're being left behind just as the plane is finally taking off. This is why the temperature in the league feels so volatile. Because what should have been a moment of shared triumph is quickly turning into a story of who benefits and who doesn't. And in the middle of that divide stands Stephanie White. She's in a no-win situation, and everyone knows it. She can't afford to alienate her veterans, many of whom have long-standing reputations and influence in the league. But she also can't risk being seen as resistant to the new wave. The entire Fever franchise is being rebranded around youth, star power, and a very specific narrative about the future of women's basketball. And White, she has to make all of that coherent in a locker room full of clashing expectations. There's no playbook for this. There's no coaching manual that tells you how to unify a team in the middle of a generational power struggle. And it's not just basketball philosophy. It's personal. White's past in Connecticut was rooted in values that feel incompatible with the current direction in Indiana. The emphasis on gritty, team-first basketball. The idea that experience matters. That culture wins. But now the culture is changing. Clark's arrival isn't just adding to the league. It's reshaping it. The conversations have shifted. Endorsements, media obligations, TikTok visibility, network deals. These aren't distractions anymore. They're part of the job. They're part of the value. And that makes some veterans feel obsolete, even if their skill sets haven't declined. It's a bizarre paradox. In theory, this should be a win for everyone. Rising tides, bigger checks, more viewers. But in reality, it's creating a very clear hierarchy. Those who are marketable and those who aren't. And no amount of hustle or history is closing that gap. That's what makes this moment feel so fragile. There's an undercurrent of panic, of players doing the math, checking the vibes, and realizing they might be phased out. Not because they can't play, but because they can't trend. It's painful, and it's creating a locker room dynamic that's less about roles and more about relevance. White has to manage that quietly, tactfully, and without blowing up her team in the process. Every one-on-one conversation, every rotation decision, every media comment is going to be parsed for subtext. Is she favoring Clark? Is she sidelining veterans? Is she trying to play both sides and pleasing no one? She knows what's at stake, not just for her own career, but for the players who are watching her every move as either validation or betrayal. Because some of them do see this as betrayal. Let's not pretend otherwise. They remember the way White stood by physicality as a legitimate strategy against Clark just last season. The way she didn't flinch when the game got chippy. The way her Connecticut teams built a reputation on toughness and resistance to hype. Those were her values. And now, she's expected to flip the script and act like Clark is untouchable. That transition isn't clean. It isn't easy, and it definitely isn't being accepted at face value by everyone involved. Especially not by players who feel like Clark is being protected in ways they never were. Who took hits without fanfare. Who got shoved to the floor and told to play through it. Who had to earn every ounce of respect, one game at a time, season after season, while cameras were nowhere to be found. Now those same players are watching a rookie get royal treatment. And no matter how talented she is, that shift doesn't sit right. It's not bitterness, it's disorientation. A cultural whiplash that no one prepared them for. And look, Clark didn't ask for this dynamic. She didn't create the imbalance, but she benefits from it. And whether it's fair or not, that comes with consequences. Because the league is evolving around her, and not everyone wants to evolve at the same pace or in the same direction. That's where the fracture is deepest. It's not just money, it's meaning. What does it mean to build a legacy in a league that might not value it anymore? White, for all her experience, doesn't get to answer that question in a vacuum. She has to live it, game by game, practice by practice. She has to find a way to validate the veterans who feel erased, while empowering the rookie who's being treated like the league savior. And she has to do it without losing the room or herself, because her reputation's on the line, too. She's not just coaching Clark. She's coaching through Clark, through the noise, the narratives, the contradictions, the politics. And every step she takes this season will be judged against the legacy she built before Indiana. Is she adapting or selling out? Is she leading or reacting? Is she building something new or just keeping the machine running? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're the subtext of every press conference, every timeout, every interaction on that bench. And White knows it. So does the league. Because this isn't just about one team. It's about whether the WNBA can grow without losing its soul. Whether it can chase commercial success without burning bridges with the players who built the league from the ground up. This is the season where all those questions come crashing into each other. Where the cost of progress finally gets tallied. Not just in dollars, but in trust. If you're following this saga and watching how the league's identity is being rewritten in real time, hit that like button. Share this with the friends who've been arguing about Clark's impact since draft night. And drop your thoughts in the comments. Can the WNBA walk the line between legacy and marketability, or has that balance already tipped too far? And don't forget to subscribe, because if this is just the beginning, what comes next is going to be even messier.